To track the profits from the sales of an economy truck, the marketing department has built functions from data on the past several years. Each year, the number sold has followed the function n of x equals negative 1/10 x squared plus 8/10 x plus 5 in millions of trucks, where x represents the number of years after the first year the truck was put on the market. The price of the truck has risen according to the function p of x equals 1 2/10 x plus 21 in thousands of dollars. The function for the total revenue generated r of x in millions of dollars is the product of the number of the trucks sold, n of x, and the price of each truck, p of x. The total profit each year, also in millions of dollars, has been about 22% of the revenue generated. Using symbolic multiplication of the functions, write the function for the total profit, t of x, from the sales of the trucks. Simplify the expression using the properties of algebra, then compare the projected profit from this year's sales, 10 years after the year the truck was put on the market, to the first year. Okay, so we want to find the equation for t of x, the total profit. And so it tells us that t of x is 22% of the revenue generated. And so 22% of something is just 22 hundredths times the revenue, which we can use our equation r of x. We don't have that equation yet, but it does tell us that r of x is the product of the number of the trucks sold and the price of each truck. So the revenue is just n of x times p of x. And so we can just write that here. And so then we can go ahead and just plug in what we know. So we know that n of x is this equation up here, and p of x is this equation. So we'll go ahead and plug those in. So then continuing here, then we still have the 22 hundredths on the outside of the other two things multiplied, and then we can distribute these other two functions. So negative 1/10 times 1 2/10 is negative 12 hundredths x cubed, since it's x squared times x, and then negative 1/10 times 21 would be then just minus 2 and 1/10 x squared, and then 8/10 x times 1 and 2/10 x is 96 hundredths x, and then that'll be squared since it's x times x, and then 8/10 x times 21 will get 16 and 8/10 x. And then lastly, 5 times 1 and 2/10 we'll get 6, and then we have the x, and then 5 times 21 we'll get 105. And so now, combining like terms in the parentheses, then we'll get, we only have the 1x cubed term, so we can leave that alone. And then we have negative 2 and 1/10 plus 96 hundredths for our x squared terms. And so, adding those together, then we get 1 and 14 hundredths x squared, and then 16 and 8/10 x plus 6x gives us 22 and 8/10 x, and then we still have 105. And so now, just finishing this out and distributing our 22 hundredths to each term, then we get 264 10,000ths x cubed minus 2,508 10,000ths x squared plus 5 and 16 thousandths x plus 23 and 1/10. And so there's our total profit equation. So now we can go ahead and answer the last question, which is what's the difference in the profit from 10 years compared to the first year. And so we can just look at that by plugging in, we know that x is going to be our years, and so we can plug in x equals 10, and then for the first year we can plug in x equals 0, since that's kind of the starting, and then we can subtract those to find the difference. So basically that'll just be t of 10 minus t of 0. And so then plugging in t of 10, then we'll get this equation here, and so then we can just type that all into the calculator, which will give us 21 and 78 hundredths. And then plugging in t of 0, that one's a little bit simpler. So all of these terms, if we plugged in 0, will just end up being 0, except for then we have a 23 and 1/10 on the end. And so t of 0 will just equal 23 and 1/10. And so then subtracting those, then we get negative 1 and 32 hundredths. And so then after 10 years, then it'll actually be lower than the first year by 1.32 million, since r of x is in millions of dollars and t of x would be in millions of dollars. So that would be our answer there. So let's go ahead and summarize this and clarify the answer. T of x equals 22 hundredths times r of x equals 22 hundredths times n of x times p of x. T of x equals 22 hundredths times negative 1/10 x squared plus 8/10 x plus 5 times 1 and 2/10 x plus 21. T of x equals 22 hundredths times negative 12 hundredths x cubed plus 96 hundredths x squared plus 6x plus negative 2 and 1/10 x squared plus 16 and 8/10 x plus 105. T of x equals 22 hundredths times negative 12 hundredths x cubed minus 1 and 14 hundredths x squared plus 22 and 8/10 x plus 105. T of x equals negative 264 10,000ths x cubed minus 2,508 10,000ths x squared plus 5 and 16,000ths x plus 23 and 1/10. T of 10 equals negative 264 10,000ths times 10 cubed minus 2,508 10,000ths 10 squared plus 5 and 16,000ths times 10 plus 23 and 1/10 equals 21 and 78 hundredths. T of 0 equals 23 and 1/10. T of 10 minus T of 0 equals 21 and 78 hundredths minus 21 and 1/10 equals negative 1 and 32 hundredths. So profits for year 10 are projected to be down by $1 and $32 million from the first year.